Perry Anderson has drawn attention to, quote, the lasting imprint of imperialism on English life, of how deeply acclimatised English culture became to the ambience of empire. It's an ambience that made a curiously small imprint on modern Scotland, despite its energetic cooperation and sometimes more aggressive lead in foreign adventures. The Scottish nationalists of today are able to exploit a ridiculous pretension to Scotland having been an occupied territory, occupied by a devilish England bent on colonisation. Anyone who knows anything about tobacco and cotton will need no convincing about Scotland's part in exploiting the empire. But England carries the can, and the English people seems perfectly willing to do so. The romance of Scottish nationalism has at some level to see England as an enemy of promise and an exploiter of freedom, which it was, but not in recent centuries without Scotland's help. Though it says much about the differences between England and English and Scottish culture, that Scottish nationalism can seek to do well out of the conjunction, whilst English nationalism must always suffer by it. In the winter of 1941, whilst doodlebugs spread through the dark overhead, George Orwell explored the strange compendium of strictness and laxity that goes towards making up the English character. His essay, England, Your England, summons a living nation on the brink of its own destruction. Orwell's England was a place of passionate moralists and inveterate gamblers. The English were a practical people with no world view. A more or less temperate collection of blimps and hypocrites, foul speakers and pointless intellectuals, horny-handed sons of toil and blind lovers of legality. He showed a nation of people with no artistic temper and bad teeth. He spoke of an upper class that would easily opt for fascism. He summoned the clatter of clogs in the Lancashire mill towns, queues outside the labour exchanges, battalions of old maids biking to Holy Communion through the mists of the autumn mornings. Yet the English were not seriously religious, and they cared more for their back gardens, the price of butter, and a nice cup of tea. It was a world of graded snobberies, each to his own, but where a certain unmistakable gentleness infused the day. Much of what Orwell had to say about England emerged, I believe, from a sort of critical and political longing. He truly detested the country's obsession with class, whilst admiring the temper of the people. Much of what I have to say myself emerges from a sense of humour, I think, though I recognise, more as time goes by, that England has a distinctive problem when it comes to political action. In the shadow of Orwell, I want to look at how a succession of writers, mainly on the left, have examined the strange case of the English. They all stop short of tackling the working class's native inertia, but they prepare us for the reality of it, and together they provide us with an explanation. As we see in the present banking crisis, the English people call for sedation, not sedition, and the spirit of the post-empire age has solidly, in England, been one of what we might call declinism. The English people today are addicted to the rhythms of their own industrial and imperial valediction. They like saying goodbye to the past over and over again, and saying goodbye to the past is the single biggest thing they can't say goodbye to. English pessimism is hot-wired to a love of paternalism, to a perpetual willingness to be mystified by the status quo. Recent events in America may show the extent to which democracy there is fueled by the populist elements. Obama is a manifestation not of Washington's need for change, but of America's. But that is not how democracy works in England. A good nationalism has to depend on a principle of the common people, on myths of a struggling commonality, and that is what English nationalism has lacked for 450 years. It's strange that Scottish nationalism and Irish nationalism and Welsh nationalism, for all their faults, are today seen by a great many as healthy, colourful movements with groundings in inevitability, whilst English nationalism continues to make people think of football hooliganism, Enoch Powell, Oswald Mosley and the BNP. Why is that? What are these conflations of identity and power and brutality that so oppress England's own notion of its character and its destiny? In The Breakup of Britain, Tom Nairn wrote of a, quote, profound ambient conservatism which has marked the structure of English society for several centuries. We see it at work every day in England, and we've seen it on the face of every British government since 1951. The Gordon Brown who wrote a biography of James Maxton would not be electable as British Prime Minister. He had to transform himself into a simulacrum of Mrs. Thatcher, which all British Prime Ministers have done, of course, since 1979. Almost every person in the present cabinet has mimicked the paternalistic pattern of England at large, shunning their true feelings on any number of issues in order to resist the upset of change or the possibility of the leader's disapproval. There are individuals now in Brown's cabinet who hate the war in Iraq and who privately deplore the 10p tax application, but they stay silent to save their jobs. Again and again they did that. They're doing it now, and everybody knows it. Not rocking the boat is an English national characteristic, though the extent to which senior British politicians are willing to cut their conscience to suit this year's fashions would have been considered venal even in the unsightly cabinets of Margaret Thatcher. Collective responsibility in the country, as in the cabinet, is at a low point, and the present government seems unlikely to produce even a token dissident in the mould of Michael Heseltine, Nigel Lawson, Ian Gilmore or Geoffrey Howe. There is a classical aversion in England to organised or even personal resistance, a frightening bend towards compromise. There has always been good causes worth fighting for, but seldom in the modern era has there been the common volition to fight them. Perhaps that is why we love the memory of the world wars so much. They're a national heritage exhibition of our least likely and least usual selves, a testament to our nature as it might have been. The old wars show us what it was like to be a people willing to resist a vast encroaching power. It is not a posture that comes very naturally to the English. Usually, the ordinary people of England only have one word to say to authority, and that word is yes. Orwell would not be surprised to see such forces at work over the English, but he might be shocked to see the extent to which the English themselves lacked, as time went on, all political resolve to change it. But again, history warned us of it. Despite the Reform Act, despite the efforts of Chartism, the English working class never set up a party in its own interest during the whole of the 19th century. The populist mode in England is silent paralysis. No to change, no to the causes of change. How did it come about then, this vast and overwhelming numbness in England's working class? Part of the answer is that it has always been there. There has been no successfully sustained incursion by the English masses into public life since the Civil War of 1642 to 51, and every subsequent attempt at visionary, transformative resistance has turned sour. It's part of the English temperament to want to live in peace, even if peace means compromise, stagnation, abuse, or appeasement. Margaret Thatcher is said to have been genuinely shocked by the ease with which England rolled over when she entered with her rapier drawn. The majority was willing to see their society lose its unions and its nationalised industries, even its status as a society, without a blink. The people who fought were often described in the press of the day as outsiders, mindless thugs, totally un-English, and they were. But Thatcher shouldn't have been surprised at the ease of her crude revolution. The English working class had been docile and careless for years. People on the left don't like to say so because in Britain it feels so counterintuitive to criticise the working class. But I strongly believe Orwell would have done so, would have rolled into the towns of England on a Saturday night now to examine why the people were so quiescent, so demoralised, so drunk, so fearful of outsiders, so drawn to fantasy and to spite, and so lacking in purpose as a social group. He would have asked those questions and would have found a way to publish his responses, seeing, I very much believe, how the question of the English working class and their culture needs to be at the centre of any notion of a better future in Britain.